Okay, and now the next star in line we have is our Chief People Officer, Gianna Driver, along with Donald Knight and Regina Ross. Gianna?
Ready to roll? All right. So, hello. I know there's a transition going on. I won't do a dance number for you, but I do see that people are transitioning in and out. So with that, though, the next session is about how to create a people-centric organization. And joining me today are Regina Ross from Khan Academy. Woohoo! Yeah. And Donald Knight from Warner Brothers. Woo-hoo. Yeah. Donald, yes, of course. All right, so Regina and Donald are two of our CPO council members. And what they do as council members is they're a think tank for a lot of what we do at Lattice. And so I'm very, very excited to learn from some of the best today on human centricity. But before we dive in, maybe let's start by, let's just define human-centric or people-centric. So what does that mean to you?
First of all, it's good to be here. I think y'all have done a phenomenal job. So,
Yes.
When I think about being people-centric, I think it's about realizing that every decision that you make in business has a people impact. Every decision, whether you choose to go in person, remote, whether you choose to allow benefits to be paid for or you make employees pay for it, every business decision impacts people. And so I think being people-centric means thinking about what is that impact that business decision is having on the people at your organization.
Absolutely. So one of the things is about humans in human resources. How do we keep that in there? When I first became an operations leader at Target, I was not in HR. I'm not an HR person by trade. But one of the things that we had to learn in onboarding was we had to take a class that was called Thinking Like an HR Manager. So operations, logistics, because what they said is that in order to run the business well, you've got to understand people, and your first responsibility is being a people leader. Mm-hmm. That's what it's about.
Mm-hmm. I love that, and I agree wholeheartedly, which is why I'm excited that we're in this people-centric space. You know, so with that, we're obviously living in an era of technology, innovation, AI. So how do you balance investing in AI while also being mindful and intentional to remain a human-centric organization? And can you be specific?
Yeah, this may be controversial, so I will.
He likes to be controversial.
I will give you that disclaimer. I don't believe there's a balance. I think, you know, as a kid of two folks who worked in the military, like I got to see my mom and dad and what that looked like in the workplace for them. And I think I'm tired, and I think many of you may be tired of going to work and seeing people who are unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And so I think as a representative of Warner Brothers Discovery, but as a person who wakes up every day and thinks about people and culture, I have a responsibility to figure out how do I make the people around me be more fulfilled at work? Because the average person works a third of their life. And so it would just suck, right? Like it would suck to have to keep going to work in a place that you're unfulfilled. And unfortunately, depending on where you landed on the planet or whatever situation you were born into, there are some people who are forced to go to workplaces they don't want to be at.
Yeah.
And so I think the good thing about technology is how do we deploy that at a rate that allows people to reach not only their full potential, but allow themselves to be more fulfilled. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the excitement that we have being on people teams or HR teams.
I agree. And we've been on the AI journey at Khan Academy for well over a year. So Conmigo, who's heard of Conmigo? If you don't know, better ask somebody. So Conmigo is an AI-enabled tutoring coach or a teaching assistant. We've deployed that in our schools. There's people who are learners across the country and across the world who are using this because what it does, it accelerates learning. So we've seen this as a proof case out in the education space. Now we're very passionate about it with our employees inside of Khan Academy. How can we use AI to accelerate the work that we do? And that is going to help us be more people-centric. So for my HR team, we have an AI for HR Slack channel. How can we use AI to get us away from the administrative work and some of the burdenous work that we're doing so that we can do the work that we love, so that we can lean into our zone of genius? That's how you balance or how you leverage AI to accelerate.
Mm-hmm. So a theme that I'm picking up on that both of you have sort of mentioned is it's not really this healthy bifurcation of AI versus humans, but both of you are essentially talking about how they work symbiotically together. Yes. It's not a, this or this. Yes. It's them, and Regina, you mentioned the administrative burden, so I want to kind of lean into that a little bit more. How do you balance the operational demands of HR, which often entail administrative tasks, with the need to focus on employee well-being, especially during times of a lot of change and sometimes uncertainty?
Mm-hmm. You want to go first? Yeah.
No, you go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So balance. But why are we here? Why are we here as an organization? So I think, when you talk about operational burden, it's getting into a lot of the how and the tactics, the what are we doing and how are we going to do it. But when you take a step back and you ask the question, start with why, Simon Sinek, why are we here as an organization? Khan Academy, we are here to provide a free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. Now, double click on that. Why are we here as a people team? Our people operations mission is to create a high-performing, inclusive workplace and great place to work that enables people to deliver the best work towards the mission. Then you double click, and after you understand the why, then you can say, okay, now what is it that we need to do in service of that why? All right, and that's when you get into the business strategy, the people ops strategy, and then what we've done as a HR team during our strategic planning sessions. So we know the why, we know the what it is that we're going to do. Now, who do we need to be? How do I need to show up? Who do we need to be individually? And who do we need to be collectively as a team so that we can do the work that we said is important for the why? And then you get into the tactics of the how. But if you dive into the how without first understanding the why and the what and the who we are, then you're not connecting the dots.
I love that. I love starting meetings out with that North Star that sort of
Why are
grounds
we here?
everyone. Yeah. It's a great way to think about starting team meetings, exec meetings, board meetings, right? To just sort of level set everyone. Yeah. And then we can get in the tactics.
Exactly.
Of the other. Do you have thoughts, Tom?
I was just going to say ditto_retweet. I don't want to do any mansplaining. But no, I do think what I like about what you said, Regina, about starting with why is I think so often, have you ever showed up to a meeting and you don't know why you're there?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can get into the routine of business.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In the routine of showing up to meeting. We talk about meeting fatigue as humans so much that no one cares anymore. It's we're so desensitized to it. And I'm I don't know if that's the way. I don't know if that's the goal. So I think starting with why is important. I think the other thing though is giving people the grace to be able to bow out and say, this is not the highest and best use of my time. Yes. And I think as a people team, you are uniquely qualified to do this because, everyone typically looks at their HR team or their people team for the rules, but we can also write new rules. Yeah.
Kill a
right?
rule.
So I think making sure that when people are in your presence, giving them that freedom to be able to opt out so they can go use their time more wisely, I think that is in itself in service to making sure that they're be able to create impact at the business.
Mm-hmm. I heard a new slogan the other day, and it was JOMO. Have you heard of that?
JOMO.
JOMO. It's the joy of missing out. And I was like, I want a JOMO a lot because,
Me too.
right? And that also can be very empowering for others. All right, so in what ways can HR leaders influence business growth while maintaining a strong focus on organizational values and culture?
Look, I think your values define the priorities for your business. And I'll share this tidbit. I know you all know it because everybody in here is super smart in HR. But like, we have people at our organizations right now that are not there because they want to be there. They're there because they haven't found their new job.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
Some people are like, you're talking to me, Donald. And so what I try to encourage people to do is like, the values define what the priorities are for that business. If you don't see inclusion at that business, they don't prioritize being inclusive. And that may be okay for you. For me, it's not okay. And so you have to figure out, I think the values really tell you what the priorities are. I think when you think about like the people team, we are uniquely qualified to be the greatest accelerator to the business because we partner at every level. Like I was hanging out with some of the amazing marketing people at Lattice earlier today, and like the fact that they even put on this event is like crazy.
Yes.
So I'm so glad that y'all are giving them 4 days off this week. This is great. They've totally earned it. But like marketing doesn't get to say that they know what's happening at every level.
Yeah.
The people team does. And so now you can then take that data back and figure out, okay, hey, like whether you're using Lattice or any other tools, like how do you have the right conversations? And I think that's where our profession is going, is like, we're already in the room, you're already at the table. Start driving the right conversations that are in service to those values that you said were a priority.
Yeah. So let me double click.
Okay.
You talk about, just the culture and people raise your hand, but don't do it. Raise your hand if you're working somewhere where you don't want to be. Like, don't raise, put your hand down.
Yeah.
Put your hand down. Okay.
And I didn't see any hands go up,
Yeah,
just for the record.
Yeah. So what you're seeing now is not the great resignation anymore, but it's quiet quitting, right? And so culture, do you think culture has a role to play in that quiet quitting? Yes, it does. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right? And so if we're not creating the culture that invites people to be their best and do their best, then you're gonna have, shifting from the great resignation now to quiet quitting. So what's the big deal? So what, who cares? Have y'all heard of the Gallup workplace study? So how much does it cost for employees to be not engaged or actively disengaged? How much does it cost? The world. $8.8 trillion. Wow. That's a lot of money. So we should care. Business leaders should care about engagement, right? Drop the mic. Like, we can go home now.
I'm just gonna say, done. Yeah.
So why is it that we have to continue to try to convince business leaders that engagement matters?
Yeah.
Tired of having the conversation.
Agree.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I think that's part of why we're here, right? We're here to talk about how we have that conversation in better, different ways, especially amidst an evolving landscape.
Yes. So let me ask you a question, Gianna. So do you believe...
I'm on Regina's panel today, ladies and gentlemen, so...
So do you believe that the people function, that HR leaders should develop strategic partnerships with business leaders?
100%, absolutely. In fact, I think that an HR professional's effectiveness is dependent upon us being business leaders first.
Can you say that one more
HR
time? Say
people
that one more time.
Our success as HR professionals is dependent upon us being business leaders first and then HR professionals second.
That's
It's
golden.
critical that we understand the why, the business, get in there to really understand what's driving the needle and what the detractors and stumbling blocks are as well. That is critical to all that we do.
But how do we do that?
So one of the things, and there was a panel earlier today that I thought said this, one of the panelists said this very well. I think it's asking to be included in those conversations.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, and I think especially like pre-pandemic, but this still occurs today, decisions happen in rooms where HR isn't present, and HR should be, because those decisions impact people.
Yes.
And there's this concept that I want to deconstruct, which is that, it doesn't have to do with performance management or hiring or firing, and so therefore, it's a business decision. Well, guess what? I'm guessing that business decision has people involved. And so therefore, there's a space in that room for an HR person.
Yeah. You're getting a little spicy.
I am.
Yeah.
I'm getting all fired up. Getting fired up here. I'm a little passionate about this. So we're on a panel about human centricity and people centricity. How do you know if you're getting this right? Right? Like, how do you know if you are effectively making the right choices, communicating the right choices to your employees, to your leaders, and doing this human-centric thing right and not over-rotating?
Well, my cheat code is I just ask my wife because she knows everything.
Smart man.
Smart man.
No, you laugh, I really do. No, I will say though that I think when it comes to our profession, we do a really good job looking at symptoms, but we don't look at root causes. Ooh. And so like when you look at like the Voice of the Employee survey, or if you look at Glassdoor, it's always a lagging indicator of what's already occurred.
Yep.
Right? Even most surveys, I don't care if you pulse. If you go pulse, like, it's already happened. People are already feeling some type of way. That sentiment is already growing. And so I guess one of the easiest ways for me to find out if we're being effective is if the opposite happens, where the positive sentiment is coming in early, right? It's like, how do you find out what the greatest restaurant is here in San Francisco? People go and they talk about it, right? We're in the art business, the storytelling business at Warner Brothers. You know when we have a good series, i.e. Succession, i.e. Industry, because all of you talk about it. It's like, oh my goodness, did you watch that show? And so I think one of the ways I try to figure out is like, what are people talking about?
Yeah, that's good.
If they're talking about the bad things and it's a negative sentiment, I don't need a pulse survey to like validate that. And one of the easiest ways for HR to find out what people are talking about is to talk to the people.
Say what?
So like we've tried to like knock down these like thoughts of like HR and this ivory tower, only HR people sitting with HR people. At our company, my team is completely dispersed with their actual client groups. I want them to know like what's happening in film or what's happening on sports or what's happening with legal. So I think the first one is like hear what people are talking about. I think the second thing, because then I'm getting, somebody just gave me my alarm, so I'm talking too long. My wife does the same thing, it's okay. I think the second way for you to find out if you're actually being effective is then look at where you started as an organization, and if you have a strategic plan, how much closer did you get to it? Because there are some organizations where they set OKRs or they set KPIs, and they're totally fine with not achieving them. And OKRs were not intended to be set and never achieved. Now, they weren't intended to be set and you achieve them in 30 days either, right? But you should figure out in this ideal state, whatever the ideal state for my people team is, or the impact that I want my team to make, how much closer did I get to that? And if you've gotten closer and people are talking positively, then you know you're being effective. If they're not, then you know you have some work to do.
I'm feeling a little conflicted with this answer because I have an engineering hat on and an HR hat on. So the engineer in me says that you cannot manage what you don't measure. And so, like, if we talk about, how do we know if we're being successful? Like, what are the metrics that you need to put in place? And I know we have leading indicators, lagging indicators, but there has to be some kind of baseline, whether it's quantitative or qualitative. So the qualitative measures could be, how many people are talking or attending training sessions or coming to meetings and things of that nature. The quantitative measures, of course, are your employee engagement surveys and things of that nature. So, but I think I like what you said about by the time you look at exit surveys or even pulse surveys, that's lagging and it's kind of too late. So one thing that I've done in my past life is do stay surveys. Y'all know what stay surveys are? Like talking to the people who are there. Why are you here? What is keeping you here? And one of the things that I did when I did my CPO listening tour was ask people, okay, what brought you here and why are you here? Right? Because then you get so much rich information of this is why I'm here. And then you could talk about, okay, now what's getting in your way? But I think those having a baseline so that you can measure the progress of qualitatively or quantitatively is important. So I'm sticking with that. Yeah, I'm sticking with that.
Can I nerd out on that for a second?
Okay, all right.
If not,
join
Gianna.
me, please. Yeah.
So there's a gentleman by the name of Marcus Buckingham. If you find him, you can tell him Donald sent you. You won't get a discount, but he'll say thank you. He's studying this. He used to work at Gallup and Strength Finders.
Yeah.
And what they found is when you're trying to figure out how do you move the needle in an organization, you don't study, like if you have a 5-point Likert scale, do not study 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah.
Don't study those people.
Yeah.
I know as HR people, like
Yeah.
the business has conditioned us that we are imperfect, but we're supposed to be perfect. And so we have to go figure out, why did we get a 1 as a leader on our engagement? Look, she's smiling,
Yeah.
all right? The only people you're supposed to study are the 5s.
Yeah.
You always study extreme positives. And when you talk to the people about extreme positives, what you find out is, why do people really like working for Gianna?
Yeah.
That's where you find out all the good information.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with a restaurant though, right? If you have your favorite restaurant or your favorite film or your favorite teacher, none of you talked to me before this. So if you think, I want you to think in your head, who's your favorite teacher of all time? It didn't take you more than 5 seconds to think of who that person was, right? Because it's an extreme positive. And so as HR people, what we have to figure out is, who are our extreme positives in our organization? You should spend real meaningful time with them. And if you focus on them, you will literally pull the rest of the organization.
Yeah.
There will be people that say, I am not supposed to be here. Great, I am so glad you opted out.
Bye.
We are gonna find a 5 to replace you. And then there's gonna be some people that are gonna be like, oh my goodness, I actually thought this was not the place for me at Khan Academy, but the fact that Regina spent time, now you've moved me to become a 5. But the only people you're supposed to study is those 5s. And there's a great tool called Lattice that can tell you all the 5s in your organization. So there you go.
Love that.
Snaps for that.
Yes,
yeah.
yes, love
yeah,
it.
no, I love that. Do you feel, when you think about the overall trends that you see right now, with all of the technology and the innovation and the AI and everything, do you feel like we as a society are becoming more human-centric amidst all of this innovation? Or conversely, do you feel like we're getting lost in all of the fray of technology?
So let me answer that, and then I'll kick it to you. But we were at a CPO HQ Elevate conference a couple of weeks ago, and one of the keynote speakers talked about adaptability quotient, and he gave some stats that when urgency goes up, and so there, like, just imagine the sense of urgency, business urgency is going up, then insecurity, empathy goes down. The empathy that we have for each other goes down. And then when that happens, the employee insecurity goes up. And then when that happens, the agility of the organization goes down. And there was some research that he shared that was like really eye-opening, but not surprising, about employees feeling more trusting of AI than their manager. And so I think that with everything that's going on with the macroeconomics and layoffs and performance management and all of that, so and there's an urgency for business, like we're losing our empathy. And one of the things that he challenged us as CPOs was that our first role of HR is to make the workplace a kinder place. How can we do that? And I think that we, in the throes of just trying to compete and go to market and all of that, because of that urgency, we've lost that empathy.
Yeah. I think, like, a part of me says, it's all chaos, what's going on. I think the other part of me says, the CPO title, I think, is one of those things that, for me, internally, what it started to represent for me is to celebrate pockets of optimism. I think in society, like, if you zoom in, there's pockets of optimism that is happening. And if you don't have the opportunity or the lens to be able to zoom in, you can get distracted by the chaos that is happening when you zoom out. And so I think for me, there's pockets of optimism, to your point, Gianna, that I think, where I do think we are moving towards a more positive society. I think generationally, like, I have a 13-year-old and I have a 7-month-old. And
Wow.
the 13-year-old was already holding us accountable. Like, well, Dad, you said, but you did. And I'm learning that. I'm explaining why to him more. My parents never, Donald and Melinda Knight, they never explained why to you. They made a decision, they were military, you did it, right? But I'm learning from him, like, those pockets of optimism around the importance of telling him decisions like, why am I making this decision? And my 7-month-old, I'm already wrapped around her finger, so it's like, it's completely ruined me. But I think there's pockets of optimism. And so I'll give you this, like, for free. This is all free. There's 5 universal languages that I absolutely adore. Food, which is why you see me drop a lot of food references. Music, dance, Sports, shout outs to Katie Ledecky. And last but certainly not least, art. And if you think about like what actually stands the test of time, those are the things that stand the test of time. What technology we're working on, what you know, my kid is on Discord, but I grew up on AOL, Instant Messenger. All those things are gonna change, right? But those 5 universal languages are gonna stay true. And I think when you look at people that work in those professions, you can find tons of positive pockets of optimism. So I know how it may look on the outside, but I think if you zoom in, you can find some really good things to be hopeful about, not just humanity, but also about the future of work.
Let me just add to that. I remember a CEO that I worked for used to say that HR is like the canaries in the coal mine. So people are looking, so for those of you who don't know, like when in a coal mine, they would have the canary in there to see if the fumes were toxic. And if the canary died, then okay, you know the workers need to leave. So HR, we are the canaries in the coal mine. People are looking at us, at how resilient we are, how joyful we are, how are we showing up? And I know it can feel like a lot of pressure, but how can we find those pockets of optimism so that we can broadcast and we can just let it be just so tangible, so people we can give people hope. People are looking at us.
It's funny that you mentioned that metaphor of the canary in the coal mine, because I hadn't thought of HR as, we are that canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
And all of those articles the last several years about the burnout, the fatigue, all of that I think are true.
Yeah.
I want to transition the conversation a little bit to think about those in the HR space who are not necessarily the chief people officer, CHRO, SVP level, because I know we've got thousands of people who are tuning in online, as well as folks here still in San Francisco. Maybe they're asleep in London, not sure, but they might not be the senior most leaders in HR. So my question is, if you're speaking to that IC or that earlier mid-career HR professional and they want to help their organization make more investments in being human-centric, how would you advise them to use their influence to be effective in advocating for being more people-centric?
Okay. This will also likely be controversial. There were athletes that wanted to speak on some of the societal changes that we saw happening. And we had news anchors and pundits tell them to shut up and dribble. And they used that as fuel to then say, oh no, I'm definitely not gonna just shut up and dribble. The reason I use that as an analogy is because I do believe each person in here is a chief people officer. Your title does not define your impact.
Yes.
That's what they told us that. That is not true. Your title does not define your impact. And so what do I mean by that? You have to find ways to influence even if you don't have authority. Find ways to drive greater synergies in the sphere of influence that you have.
Yes.
And so I have one of the most amazing people on my team. Her name is Vanessa. She leads the people and culture, a large part of my team for sports. I told her, you're the chief people officer for sports. I don't care what your title says. When that team is looking for somebody to rally their team on succession planning, performance, promotion, they're going to Vanessa. And so you don't have to have that title. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is, so because you can create impact beyond your title, how much impact do you want to make? You should think about this the same way Katie was counting laps, you should count your impact. How much impact do I want to make this quarter?
So good.
How much impact do I want to make this year? If you want to talk like finance people, you think about, I try to do an impact call with my team around earnings call. How much impact did we make? Those leaders didn't hire the folks that staffed that film, we did. Those people didn't hire the folks that ran the amazing marketing campaign, we did. So if you went out and you saw Barbie and you saw Beetlejuice, thank you. There were people that we hired that did that for them, right? I'm trying to figure out how much impact are we doing? And what I have found is when you're able to speak in that lens, you'll find opportunity all around,
Absolutely.
regardless of what title you have.
I agree, 100%. One of the best definitions of leadership that I ever heard was from Kevin Cashman's book, Leadership from the Inside Out. Leadership is authentic self-expression that creates value. Authentic self-expression that creates value. So anyone can do that regardless of title. So how are you expressing yourself authentically in a way that creates value? How are you having impact? Like, just decide, this is what I'm going to do. And for me, I am not a person that's chased titles or chased roles or positions. I see a need, I meet the need. I see an opportunity, and I like, what can I do to support that? And so as you do that, you're going to be influencing where you are called to influence in your sphere. And then doors are going to open for you to like, okay, I've got now a bigger sphere of influence, because you're stepping into where you are. You're not despising where you are. Like, okay, what can I do right here? How can I create value? And the more value you create, then the sphere gets bigger and bigger.
As I listen to both of your amazing answers to this question, I can't help but think, I wish that a younger version of myself had mentors like you to look up to, because that is so moving, just hearing both of you and your answers to that. So truly, yeah. Which leads me to our last question, then we'll open it up for some Q&A. And the question is, if you could talk to the younger you in your career, what's the one skill you'd tell yourself to develop to be more human-centric?
Wow.
Listen to your wife.
But you were young, you weren't married then.
I wasn't married.
Yeah.
No, respectfully, I do listen to my wife, but I do think the number one skill I would tell myself is mastering the art of storytelling.
That's good.
Stories live on. Like, if your favorite food that you get to make, that's a recipe, it's a story, it was already documented for you. And what I like is, like, the very first film was ever created, it was called Round Hay of a Garden. And I thought it was amazing because there might have been movies made before, but it's the first one that people can actually like attribute to actually still being on film. It's made in 1888. And if you watch the film, which is really, really short, because back then films were really short, you see this amazing scenic view of gardens. And I was like, how amazing that the first movie that's still being recorded today that we still have preserved is about a garden, because from a garden, everything can grow. And I think that's the power of storytelling. It's like, as HR professionals, if I would have told myself, if I could tell better stories, I can get more yeses inside of the organization, or I can create greater impact inside of the organization. Or for those that are actually in roles that you're looking and you don't want to tell people that you're looking, all of the impact that you've made, there's companies out there that are looking just for you and your experiences. But you may not know how to tell that story. Yeah. And so what I would tell you to do is invest in the art of storytelling. That's good. That's the number one skill.
That's so good.
And then listen to your wife.
So for me, I became a professionally certified coach in 2015. And I am an engineer by trade. So I spent the first 12 or so years of my career in engineering. And as an engineer, you're trying to get to like that 99.9% confidence. You're coming in, you're solving problems. I wish that the young me knew how to be more coach-like, because I thought I had to come in and solve the problem. I had to diagnose, I had to advise, I had to tell. And then shifting into HR, I'm an HR advisor. I'm gonna tell you what to do. I'm gonna tell you what not to do. And like coaching, when I was in my coach training, it was so difficult for me to stop advising and stop telling, and then start asking powerful questions. And then listening, like really listening, not listening to try to say, okay, here's my rebuttal. And so I wish the younger me knew how to bring out the brilliance of others, and not thinking that I had to come in with all the answers and all the solutions. You know, like, no, they have the answers within them, the team, the organization, the employees. Your job as a coach is to draw that brilliance out of them by demonstrating curiosity, powerful questioning, active listening. So I wish that the younger me would have been a coach.
I love that.
What about you?
I was about to say, you have to answer this.
Yes, yes.
You know, the moderator doesn't normally take questions from the panelists, just saying, but, you know.
New rules. New rules.
You know, I think I'd probably tell the younger me that this notion of bifurcating the personal and then putting your you know, like leaving your personal life at the door and then being your work person, I think I would tell the younger me to throw that notion out the door.
Wow.
because I grew up I'm Filipino, but I grew up in a very non-diverse community in East Texas, and I didn't feel like it was okay to kind of be different and to be me. And there were lots of other family things in my personal life going on, and I wish that I had the courage to embrace all the parts of me.
Yeah.
Because I've since learned in my process of evolution that it is those experiences and that differentness that makes us unique and that gives us a different perspective. And we see the same sky, but we might see different stars, right? And that's what allows us to map the constellation.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
I just came up with that
Stars
just
right
now.
behind us. That was so, that imagery, oh my goodness.
know.
That was great.
So with that, let's open it up to questions, either online or from the audience, around crafting people-centric, human-centric organizations and investing in that. Are there any questions live in the room? And do we have a mic? I see a question over here. Okay, and we'll repeat the question, sure.
So I'll repeat the question and then I'll take that. So in a startup environment or in organizations, you have some people who are just wanting to like get the next role, next title, like grow really quickly. And so for me, in my experience, it's been about showing that there's growth that may not be vertical. So find out like what are your career aspirations, what are your interests, what are your values, and then help people to broaden their aperture of what growth looks like. That growth it's not necessarily a promotion or a vertical leap up, but how can you take on different assignments? How can you perhaps serve as a mentor and look at it more holistically, how you're developing and how you're growing, and then taking time to like really reflect, because there are some people who want to grow so quickly up the ladder that they have growth in title, but not growth in leadership, not growth in their maturity, so that's just the way that I would approach it. But anyone else, Donald or Gianna?
I agree.
No, I would agree with that. I think the only thing I would add is that time does not define quality. And even in my own growth in my own career, some of the roles that I saw the greatest quality of experience, I might not have sat in that role the longest.
Yeah.
So like, I remember when I got to work on M&A activity as an HR business partner, and I got to sit number 2 on my CPO, it was absolutely daunting. I did not think I was qualified. I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm staying up to all types of night. But what that did was allow me the opportunity to find out I had a 7th gear that I would have never found had I not had that level of exposure. And so I think when we're looking to coach people, it's like, how much exposure has this experience given you? How much quality of experience has this given you? And if you haven't had enough diverse experiences, there might be opportunities here for greater growth. Like if you're in the people business right now, over the last 5 years, there's people in our profession that never navigated a pandemic. They never navigated work from home. They never navigated 2021, 2022 when we had hot potatoes or musical chairs, when everybody was switching roles and going across the street for literally 40 grand more. Like they never experienced that, but they experienced things we never experienced. And so it's not to say one person's experience is better than the other one. It's trying to figure out what is the quality experience we've been able to experience and then figure out how we can then round that out. And so that's one of my tricks. I think the other trick I would say, I think Gianna, if you look at Gianna's resume, which I have personally, is really phenomenal. The other thing that I think I would add is try to figure out how do you get experiences that are additive.
Yes.
So if you look at her profession, which I've done, she had no clue we were gonna get this question. She had no clue I was gonna big her up like this either. But she has the holisticness of her career is so additive at public, private companies, sitting number 1, sitting number 2, leading business partners, not leading business partners, to be able to figure that out, I use people like her and folks like Kara and others that I hold in high regard when I'm coaching my own team around how many different additive experiences have you had? I don't want to promote you just so you can have title. I want you to have something that's additive so that other people will call you for other opportunities. So yeah, and yes, you are a CPO. I'm glad you're saying that.
Yes.
Makes me feel.
All right, we have time for one more question. I think I see the mic over there.
So first of all, thank you. This was just like knowledge fireworks, to keep with the sky analogy. Early on, Donald, you talked about how we spend a third of our life at work, and so we want people to make sure they're fulfilled. What advice do you have for those of us in the HR seat to, number one, identify if people are feeling fulfilled, and also how to coach them when they're not?
Great question. I went through this, so I can answer this. First, you have to define what your fulfillment is.
Yes.
Like, we're so required to be shepherds that we have not even shepherded our own. So like, I can tell you what I am most fulfilled planting seeds. I love to plant. Like, I don't even need the affirmation anymore. Like, for me, I love to be able to walk away and see that forest over there, people admiring the forest, and I'm like, they have no clue who planted all those seeds. So I'll give you a real life example. Did you see the great Ariana Moon on this stage earlier today? She was on my team at my last company. To see her groom and blossom into the leader that she is today, that's where I get my greatest joy. So I have to first define my fulfillment. Then when you ask someone to define theirs, what you typically find is that they can't.
Yeah.
That's where you then can turn into the coach or the advisor to help them figure out what are the things that make you be fulfilled as a person.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
thanks. All right, folks, we are at time. So thank you all for attending our session, and a round of applause for Donald and Regina.
And Gianna.